Realist Hero is a power fantasy that's not meant for everybody. Realist Hero is an isekai power fantasy for those who crave actual political power. While most isekais focus on trying to fix the mistakes that is the last 30 years of your life, Realist Hero speaks to the human desire of dominating people. How a Realist Hero Rebuilt the Kingdom is an isekai anime about Kazuya Soma, a 19-year-old who spent way too much time playing Civilization. Pursuing his passions, he was studying to be a career civil servant in Japan. Unlike most humanities students, he is whisked away from a future of soulless corporate slavery and summoned to the kingdom of freedom, in which to be their hero. Using his training and studies, he turned a failed state into a superpower in one lifetime.
You would do something that low, Frank?
I arranged the brick modding.
Political power is like having a good childhood. Everybody definitely wants it. Those who need it probably not going to get it. And most of the time, unless your bank account is the size of the average customer from the Heart Attack Grill, your kids probably won't get it either. Realist Hero speaks to the primal lust for power within humanity. It speaks to the basic daydream that we all have when we try to answer the question, wouldn't it be nice if I was president? We don't think about the specifics of the daydream. We don't ask ourselves how it is possible to get there. We just desire the part where we get the prize. That is why we watch an anime man do it for us. Unless you are an accomplished academic, a bureaucrat with a good career, or a politician, it is hard to be able to gain an opportunity at a real-world political power. Realist Hero exists in that space where political desires finally have an anime to project to. Soma's road of establishing power is a path most animes do not walk. Unlike most isekai protagonists, like Rimuru from Tensura, Soma does not have the same amount of physical power nor the game guide power of Raphael to cheat. Soma had to contend with a hostile foreign country breathing down its neck, while at the same time a civil war at home challenging his legitimacy as king. And he won with nothing but his wits and personal skill in politics. This form of victory by grit is somewhat missing in isekai, as most authors rely on OP powers to win, and not having to bother with the creation of actual government institution to be able to combat and win against its forces. This gives some level of realism for as far as a light novel fantasy story go.
I am the Senate.
The conflict in Realist Hero isn't just one championship trophy, or some high school romance with a money shot of emotions. The battleground is the future fate of thousands or maybe millions of people, and failure means death, disease, and starvation. Suffering so immense in scale that tragedy is too much of a small word for it. It is this feeling of playing with constant paranoia and the knowledge of multiple traitors, threats, and sometimes outright forces of nature coming in trying to destroy everything that you have. The buildup of plans upon plans to produce solutions and unorthodox answers to the challenges your enemies put in front of you. This mix of neuroticism, paranoia, and political intrigue leads to the culmination of all plots and plans, and the one decisive day where those adversaries perish. In Realist Hero, the goal of Kazuya Soma is the total and absolute destruction of their adversaries, whether it be a force of economic whiplash or violence. It is not victory by being overpowered, but through the total domination with the creation of forces, methods, and powers never before seen in their world. Usually in an isekai, the story is about a protagonist that's also a walking nuke. This removes a lot of the challenge of actual governance, and they use their interdimensional capabilities as a crutch in geopolitics, as most if not all adversaries are forced to bend to their will. Why be worried of foreign hostile powers when Rimuru can just teleport your overpowered army with overpowered gear and overpowered generals, and commit an... The economy is complicated. Military organization is complicated. Waging war, reforming a country out of the Dark Ages into the Industrial Revolution is complicated. Realist Hero, for good or ill, tries to tell a story about that. A step-by-step process, even though it may sometimes look and feel tedious. There's no time capsule trading arc in a military build-up. No ultra levels of magical power brute forcing its way to victory. No chosen one syndrome. The hero here wins how politicians win wars in real life. Planning political plays, a working economy, and just being smarter than the adversary. Military organization and economic development had to be invented and improved constantly because of the limitations of man. Realist Hero highlights this idea in a genre full of deus ex machinas, and provide solutions that we use in modern society in order to solve the problems that our hero faces in the anime. For example, using the power of modern road networks, modernizing education, and or dealing with the massive headaches and problems of having an armed forces reliant on the local nobility, and then reforming it into one national force that only answers to one ruler. This is pretty much the step-by-step blueprint of how countries reformed themselves into superpowers during the 1600s, by transitioning from a feudal society into a global spanning empire. Not only in the context of development, but even in his conduct of hostile acts against his adversaries. He uses methods that may not be technologically out of reach but are so advanced that trying to comprehend it from a perspective of an average individual from that time period is actually impossible. Not because these people are stupid, but because these people did not have the history yet to have in order to be able to create these kinds of methods. The creation of an organized intelligence apparatus, an overwhelming successful use of propaganda, psychological operations, and soft power to ferment a rebellion of foreign territory, and placation in the restless local population. These things that we have in the modern era because of our long histories of conflicts in the area of espionage and information warfare. Not all victories needs direct forms of violence. By removing the overpoweredness of an isekai protagonist and facing a multitude of problems, Soma is forced to chase power via millennia of our human history on Earth. Using these extremely advanced methods on a world that isn't ready for it shows the difference of power between them, showing why the people who employ these capabilities are the strongest countries in our timeline. This with the context of hostile political actors, both internal and external. This balance of development and constant political battle, not only from foreign enemies but also from enemies within. Creating and achieving development to be stronger is the realistic story of empire building. Most Civ anime makes it look easy. Internally, they are treated as walking gods. Their supposed loyalty not made from logic and reasoning of fulfilled self-interest like a normal person, but from actual fanaticism that makes disgruntledness and dissent something akin to blasphemy. I mean, just look at Slime Isekai and Overlord. They literally prostrate themselves physically. Even if the people of Nazarick or Tempest were very grateful personally towards their leader, that does not mean there is no source of conflict. Not all political decisions are for the benefit of everybody. Eventually, you will piss someone off, and by virtue of making a decision and make a faction or part of the society left out. While at the same time, though foreign enemies tend to be the source of most conflict in these kinds of anime, when there is conflict and the hero wins, they win not because they are the better country, but usually because they just muster enough named characters and very colorful hair colors to win the war with one squad. Wars and conflicts are measured not by the tons of food, number of men, or technologies wielded in isekais like these, but it's usually measured by the Dragon Ball Scouter glass, basically power levels, or how many people you have that are very OP. Most of the time the protagonist team just has more named characters and that's why they win. Not that I think these kinds of plots are bad. In fact, I really do enjoy Slime Isekai and Overlord, and there is definitely a popular demand for these stories. There is also another kind of story to tell, the detail-oriented, overly complicated kind of stories that Mushoku Tensei, Spice and Wolf, and Mao uses of the world that I personally gravitate to. The emotional release of the show is a normal man with enough skill and luck managing to overthrow a 100-year-old feudal society, and remaking it in his own image. An image and plan that isn't some handover, wishy-washy process, but a hard-stricken, meticulous, detail-oriented plan. Realist Hero brings so much for me that is quite sad, even with all the reasons that I love it. Even I can't ignore all of its imperfections. But even after all that emotional charged viewing of the show, it is imperfect. Its exposition's a bit too much because it's pretty much an entire copy and paste of the light novel, and they just turned it into a script of the show. In a book, maybe it might work because all you can work with is words, but this is an anime. Exposition works differently and is more forgiven in written form. But when you get 3 to 5 minutes of just exposition, even if you love the show, you can feel that sometimes the scenes can be a bit too long. The thing with anime is that it's a medium built not only with script and dialogue, but also with visual and colors and a whole lot of pacing and all that stuff. Can't really try to force good content of a book's dialogue onto the TV screen and expect it all to work out just fine. This is very apparent because Dune just came out. Having just read Dune and finished watching Denis Villeneuve's 2021 version shows the masterplay of translating extremely thick, large context onto video form. This scene is a great example of just that. The scene starts with Paul listening to a podcast about Fremen walking. The camera then cuts to a device going to the room. We don't know what the device is. Paul then noticed it and his action shows that it is a threat. After it is dealt with, it is explained in the next scene that it was a weapon that could have killed him. In this scene alone, exposition was handled not in a long-winded conversation, but it is weaved into the scene. The Fremen lecturer explains the Fremen walk that would be used later down in the movie. It also explains that sandworms are attracted to rhythm. The Hunter-Seeker was first explained as a threat by Paul's reaction. In the book, both the Hunter-Kill and the Rhythm Walk was explained in a long-winded exposition. But it worked well because it was in a book and Frank Herbert was a great writer. Villeneuve's and his team's efforts on the translation from a very successful book to a very good movie shows the skill of good editing, and even with great source material, some calls have to be made to make a better movie. If you read the book, Dune has a lot of backstories and histories. Chom, the Lancerat, and the Butler and Jihad, just to name a few. But not all of them even made it to the movie. Going back to Realist Hero, it can be said that sometimes some explanations can handicap the story that you're trying to tell. The beauty of a movie or an anime with a large backstory is that in order to show the context, an exposition to create a world, it is sometimes that you do let some concepts fly, or even just stand on its own without explanation. Villeneuve made enough good calls to make a good movie, and sometimes you just have to trust the source material and let its plot carry the story while at the same time weaving the world building in the most seamless way. In anime, we already have a really good blueprint on how to make a good anime with a really large backstory, and it's called Musuko Tensei. Beautiful colors, slow pace, memorable characters. That's what Musuko Tensei is. Unlike most anime though, not everybody can afford that kind of treatment. It is honestly way too expensive, especially after watching 2 seasons of Realist Hero. You really get a sense that you're not really gonna get that amount of money for their production. But if you really wanted to build a show like that, that is the way to do it in anime form. I think the problem is that with shows like this, in order for it to get a massive acclaim that it really deserves, is that you need a director and or a production team that has the innovation and willingness to not pull the punches. Having a production like that would mean sacrificing some characters. It will also mean rewriting the dialogue or constructing new scenes just to show the significance of Shoma's leadership and not just an entire episode explaining the one concept. It is a visual medium. They kinda have the duty of showing the significance and not just tell you what is happening. People don't just like being told, and especially with an anime where you have the ability to construct and create the show that is needed for the story. A show where its audience is not just relegated to people like me in the minority, who already have a tremendous amount of context and subject knowledge already built up and are just ready to enjoy the show. In conclusion, Realist Hero is a great show. Give it a shot. If it doesn't strike your fancy, it really isn't for everybody. But by God, it is something worth defending.